Exclusivity, a word once synonymous with consoles, has now taken on a common prefix, timed, with Arrowhead's hugely successful Helldivers 2 delivering PlayStation Studios' biggest gas-focused game ever last year on PS5 and PC. Now Xbox players can join the fight for democracy on their Xbox Series X and S. The game uses the team's own custom version of the Stingray engine, which was the same as the 2015 original. This Xbox port is handled by Arrowhead and PC specialist Nixxes, which aims to extend that popularity a little bit further. Now this port is the full console package, dual modes on Series X and S. We get a 30fps quality mode and a 60fps performance mode, just like on PS5 and Pro. All modes, options and features are identical, right down to the rare on consoles detailed performance metric overlay. However, this has one key difference. A DRS flag, or dynamic resolution scaling, on Xbox consoles, which enables us to validate accurately our pixel counts. Now this is the first change, as both PlayStation consoles run fixed resolutions in both modes from all my counts. Performance on PS5 targets 1920 by 1080 with no upscaling applied, even the UI is a flat 1080. Which is matched exactly on Xbox Series X, as are the graphical effects, texture quality, shadows, level of detail, everything. By playing both consoles in a multiplayer game together, we can match everything precisely, even down to the swarm of arachnids. And both quality and performance are a pixel perfect match, with the quality mode now targeting approximately 80% of a full 4K output at 3072 by 1728 on PS5, but bizarrely, a lower 3072 by 1080 resolution, again around 8% of the full 3840 horizontal axis, on Xbox Series X. Now this is an approximate 66% increase in pixels over the performance mode, and it compresses the vertical axis by 50% from a full 2160p height. From a porting perspective, this doesn't make sense, as the two base consoles are close enough in specifications to not have much margin for change, even in such a dynamic title. Well, aside frame rates, but that comes shortly. Now my suspicion here is that PS5 is possibly using a form of checkerboard reconstruction in its quality mode to achieve those outputs, and on the Series X, the software-based solution is either broken, bugged, or not implemented at all due to the missing hardware. I did see some signs of VRS, or variable rate shading, also enabled on Series X, and all this means the quality mode can be a little softer and have a noisier image than the PS5 and certainly PS5 Pro, but in play the difference is not huge but noticeable. Now the PS5 Pro mirrors the settings of both consoles but simply ramps up the resolution dial, with quality now running a locked native or possibly checkerboard, also 4K resolution at the same 30fps rate. And the performance mode now hits again locked 2560 by 1440 with a silky smooth 60fps output, and as such improves texture quality, fog, detail, distant resolve, but overall is a refined version that uses the extra horsepower to improve image quality rather than visual fidelity or frame rates. Now the Xbox Series S targets 1920 by 1080 with DRS in performance, and it scales very frequently and linearly to a low of 1280 by 720. The PC, like performance metrics added to all versions, offers a full breakdown of render time, worker threads, GPU time, frame time, and resolution scaling factor on a real-time frame-to-frame basis, and this is how we can confirm that the Xbox Series X doesn't scale because it doesn't move, whereas it does move here on the Series S, and this confirms my counts of 1280 by 720 on both axes as the lowest point, which is 66.6% of both 1920 and 1080, and once we hit this level we can dip below that 16 millisecond refresh time often enough to notice. Now quality is not running dynamic scaling from my counts or the metrics, remaining locked at 2560 by 1440, but all is not as it seems, as again we appear to be using a reconstruction technique on both axes from a half base, 1280 by 720. This means the quality mode offers a similar but varying 77% pixel increase over the DRS scaling performance mode. Now this leads me to believe that Series S runs the same reconstruction solution as Series X, just on both axes. However, more cuts are present. Volumetrics, shadow resolution and filtering, level of detail, and more obviously texture quality are all cut back on performance mode significantly. Both modes appear to also use variable rate shading, which is far more obvious in performance mode and can make the Series S version look very blobby. Now these are less impacted in quality mode, but clearly a rung or two lower than on PS5, Series X and PS5 Pro. The performance mode is the most galling, with textures being incredibly low quality, volumetric fog being blurry, objects being blocky, popping in, decals flickering, and low image quality with heavy aliasing, flickering and ghosting. Quality mode does improve all these areas, and it's hard to ignore on a large 4K screen due to the incredibly poor image of that performance mode. However, the choice becomes less obvious once you start bug hunting and input latency and performance enters the equation. So far, the port is okay, aside the issues on reconstruction. Sadly though, it does not continue on the positive trajectory. With a fixed resolution on all full current generation consoles, the safe assumption is we have sufficient headroom on all to deliver on the 33 or 16 millisecond frame times quality or performance mode necessitate. Taking Series X first, compared against base PS5 in the exact same game, battles and loads of their respective performance modes, we can see the odd stutter and frame time pause that look to be more memory, API and even CPU related. Small stutters of 33-50 milliseconds can impact Microsoft console far more often and prolonged than on PS5, which can also see some small stutters from time to time. These gaps widen though once we have dense geometry, foliage, dynamic procedural destruction, particles and alpha effects. Observing the same napalm strike on both consoles, we can see the PS5 offering a massive 40% increase in frame rate over the Xbox Series X. And even when both dip, the PlayStation 5 is often delivering 25 to 30% better frame rates at identical settings and resolutions. Quality mode is much closer, with them both rarely dipping, but again, both can and PS5 is always far better, with more random and prolonged dips on Series X cropping up, which seem to be again more engine and API related than any direct reflection on the hardware side. Like the performance mode, the increased visual and resolution quality are a factor, which may be helped by the DRS choice present in the engine being enabled, but I doubt this would resolve all the performance issues noted here. The increased visual clarity is welcome, but the far longer frame persistence, reduced input latency, and consistency lower frame rates means that the quality mode on both is welcome, but it's not my recommended way to play on either console, specifically for a fast-paced, hectic online multiplayer title like this. Moving to PC, we can see why we get some of these performance issues, and I believe some of them may be CPU related. Using an RTX 5060 paired with an 8-core 5800X 3D and 32GB of fast DDR4 RAM, we can have points where the game could become CPU limited on weaker 36 or 5600X AMD CPUs, and they're similar to what we see in both consoles. But here, we are 100% GPU bound on this RTX 5060 at native 1080p ultra settings. Dropping settings would increase performance, but into the low hundreds, we would be fully CPU bound even with this combo. The RTX 5060 can run on average in the 70s, and during this big skirmish, it never dips below the high 60s, which exceeds the PS5 and Series X in their respective performance modes, but they are capped at 60. And in all likelihood, they actually run a mix of high and ultra, specifically on CPU loaded level of detail and debris. This game does run well on the PC, with it becoming more demanding the higher up the resolution you go, which is why the PS5 Pro is doing a great job hitting a close lock on 60 FPS at that 1440p level. Xbox Series S is a similar tale, but slightly better due to the DRS scaling that is present on the weaker Xbox console. It often maintains a 60 FPS level in exploration and combat in its performance and quality mode. We do get some dips in quality, less frequently, but tend to be momentary skips either side of the required 33 millisecond frame time when large explosions require instantiating a geo swap, alpha effect, etc. But most of the time, you get a pretty consistent 33 millisecond frame delivery, superior image quality, and stable 30 FPS rate. Performance is slightly worse on the target, but it's superior overall, as long as you can ignore the big impact of the object detail, textures, and blurring. But even with dynamic resolution scaling active, it can dip with room to spare on that scaling factor, likely due to the issue being not fully GPU load related, or the system is a frame or two behind the read back from the engine times. But in the extraction section, when a swarm of enemies, pyrotechnics and drops are coming, we can hit the bottom of that 720p DRS level and then get prolonged dips into the low 50s. Similar to the worst point seen on PS5, but still superior to its bigger Series X brother. Arrowhead struck gold with their sequel to the 2015 PS3 PS4 original by moving to a third-person, heavily tactical but largely procedural and flamboyant shooter. They garnered a huge audience that has only grown further with this Xbox release. The port is a solid one from Arrowhead and Nixxes, clearly based on the DX12 PC release. Aligned visual quality on Series X and required cutbacks on Series S on memory and GPU limits are expected, with performance being close enough to PS5 to be the better version in that regard. The Series X, however, should be able to come closer to the PS5 or even similar PC spec CPU and GPUs, as we saw with the RTX 5060, which it should be able to equal, or at least be very close to, closer than what we see in these results. Instead, we get a game that lags heavily behind the base PS5 and PC versions, mostly in its performance mode. It does maintain a decent 60 FPS in large portions of play, but it can often fall below expectations, even with VRR screens, to require a little more time in the oven. This is evident in the visual side also, with the resolution delta being a factor in highlighting the inherent and never inconsequential API differences and software stack between PS5, Xbox and even PC. Hopefully the team will iron out the small gripes here soon and deliver a closer match to the PS5 original. But what we have now still delivers the goods, well, aside a bug here and there. And that's it for all things Space, Troopers and bug related. If you like what we do here on IGN Performance Reviews, then keep it IGN, and we'll catch you on the next one.